So hello class, this is me, Mr. C, and today we're going to work with some watercolor. Now, we are going to do a landscape. So the first thing we should do, look, these are my colors. I'm going to get a little bit of brown. Now, the difference between watercolor and let's say drawing, right, is the more water you put on a pigment, the lighter it will be. The less water, the darker it will be. With the pencil, it's the more pressure, the darker your value. This is a little bit different. So, with a little bit of water, right? Let's start off with this tree. Maybe a little bit more pigment. Okay. So, branch coming out like this. Little branches coming out. Okay, let's go back with a little bit more of that pigment. And also, the more water you use, the faster your paint will dry. Okay, so let's leave that alone for a moment. Now, here's my water, right? I'm going to always clean my brush when I'm going to use another color. So, there are these beautiful mountains in the back, but before we do that, let's get some yellow. Now, because yellow is the lightest color on this spectrum of colors that we have, you don't have to use so much water, because if you do, it's going to be hard for it to show. Now, I know this is relatively dry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, or dare I say paint, this yellow right here. A little bit more water, a little bit more yellow. This line goes through. Okay, great. Now, another thing that you could do to help your drawing process is one of these, like a light little fanning that can help. So, while this is drying, now, I've done this first, I've done this second. So I know that this tree is gonna dry a little bit faster than this right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work right here. Now there's these beautiful mountains in the back. So let's go to our orange right here. And let's just start escaping some of these mountains. A little bit of water, kind of dabbing it right through. So I'm going to let that sit for a bit. Now, as this is drying right here, the next thing I'm going to do is, with a lot of water, I'm going to make sure my brush is clean. Now, that's very important. If your water starts to become a little muddy, maybe it's time to change out the water. It shouldn't be there yet. It's relatively clear. So, with a lot of water, I'm going to come over here to this blue with a lot of water and just kind of add maybe some clouds here. Now look at the motion that I'm doing. You see that layering right here? That's what I want to see, right? So with a lot of water, whole brush. A little bit more water. A little bit more water. Great. Fantastic. Clean my brush again. So, what I want to do now is I want to come over here to this black, right? And with just a little bit of water, more pigment than water, I'm going to come back into this tree and add some fine details, right? Now, when I come back, I'm going to use basically no water so I can make these values very, very dark. So right now it's kind of like 50-50, half water, half pigment. Okay. Now, with that same black, now this is different. This is, let's say 75% water, 25% pigment, right? I'm gonna add the shadow right here on this tree. Now this is where it can get kind of confusing, right? So I'm gonna start right here. I'm not barely touching this tree. Look how much water that I have already. I have this tree. Shadow come to be right about here. Now, the thing about watercolor is that the same water that's in this cup, the same water that are in those streams, in those rivers, in those oceans, it's uncontrollable. Now, you might think that you can control this completely. I mean, you can have skills to help yourself, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to control it completely. And instead of running away from that, instead of being nervous from that, you should embrace that, okay? So as this is drying right here, again, this is very important, right? Let's make sure that my brush is completely clean because I've used the darkest color, the darkest value on this palette right here. And do you notice that my palette is still very clean? I want to see this all the time. Let's say your color, and let's just do like a quick little tutorial on that. Let's say right here your color is a little messy. Hold it down, just come in there and just kind of take some of the value, some of the color off. Let's say you mix too much, grab a little napkin, lightly scrape a little bit of that off, okay? So let's see what's dry. Let's go back to the mountains, right? Now, I want these mountains to have a lot of value, right? I want these mountains to have a lot of color and value. So with a lot of water and a lot of pigment, I'm just gonna start putting more color into these mountains. Remember that this is my background, this is my foreground. So as this is working its way, a little bit more water. Everything else should be drying. Okay. Now, you can tell that I'm painting through the tree because the tree should be, if not dry, drying. Okay, so we have that. Now, let's work into